spoiler alert for those who need it before you actually go ahead and watch this, because if you haven't watched the trailer, you probably should go do that first. We have literally everything inside of this trailer from the start of it to the end. There's Mjolnir with Cap, Doctor Doom, obviously, Shuri, Sue Storm, the entirety of the Fantastic Four, new Avengers, incursions, the School of Gifted Youngsters, the X-Men. Everything about this movie is shaping up to be a banger, and what we have coming up for, especially at what was coming back to us with Endgame inside of theaters again. I'm so excited about this movie. Let's get into it. We have a whole bunch to get into and not a lot of time. Let's ride. The Doomsday trailer is an absolute banger, and I had to just turn the camera on and talk about this because what in the world is going on here? We have the looks of incursions because of the beginning of the trailer, and then we got Cap actually holding Mjolnir. What? Oh my goodness. Salutations and fist bumps. Let's get into this, bro. Okay, so this breakdown of Avengers Doomsday, the trailer, currently, as I'm watching it, this is just a raw breakdown of as I'm watching this. So I'm going to be looking away from the camera as I'm doing this because, again, I'm doing this live. So what we were hearing in the beginning of this was Thor directly on a close-up of Dr. Doom while Thor is talking about all of the things that he's seen happen, transpire, and he's scared. Now, the fact that he's saying that he's scared is all of the things that we should already know that we are in for a ride inside of this movie, bro. At the 14-second mark, right? We see Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, which is the school for the X-Men, by the way. We know that the X-Men are going to play a huge role. Huge. How exactly? Not exactly sure, but a huge role inside of this. So if we look again at the beginning, looking at Charles, as he sees what he sees, it looks like a world blowing up. But maybe that's an incursion. Maybe that's an incursion. I need to say that again because he's blinded by something. It's hard to tell, though, exactly right now what's going on. But again, my big guess is that this man is watching an incursion happen, and that's the reason why everybody is up against each other and trying to like take each other's heads off because they're fighting for territory. They're literally trying to fight and save their own worlds. Deadpool already tap danced on this before inside of Deadpool and Wolverine, and now they're like cracking it open again, but they literally started the conversation of incursions in the new Avengers or the Thunderbolts, whatever you want to call it. Like that post-credit scene started it all, in my opinion. Now, moving on. What is also interesting for me is as I slowed this down, the first thing that I saw was the Black Panther logo, which reminded me of Doom War. That comic has, since I read it, the significance of that for me is that we are going to potentially see that story play out or some form of that story play out on camera here. And it's interesting because it's going to be Shuri that actually does it, and that it's going to happen possibly before the next Black Panther movie. So that's going to influence whatever is going to happen in that story too. Now, for the backstory, as the beginning of the trailer actually happens, we do hear a voice that sounds like it could be Bishop, but there's no on-screen verification of that yet. But it sounds very similar to a voice that we heard in Days of Future Past. And when this voice is actually speaking, he's talking about a decision that they're going to have to make, which again feels like he's talking about the decision of having to make incursion decisions, who dies and who lives, based on which world actually blows up. And as we get that close up on Dr. Doom, you can see in the background that he has fire behind him of some sort. So possibly, is he actually the one that caused this, or is something actually blowing up behind him? There's a lot going on here. Then at the 39-second mark, we can see a new logo for the Avengers because, again, remember inside the trailer or the post-credit trailer for the new Avengers, aka the Thunderbolts, they were talking about branding and how to actually make that work with the new version of the Avengers. So again, we're getting new versions of the Avengers inside the MCU, similar to what we've seen in the comics. Now, this seems to be what they came up with, which isn't the best in my opinion, but later we do get a close-up of the entire team, which includes Cap, Yelena, and the rest of the crew probably battling out inside of Avengers Tower for branding. Now, something to note here and that stood out for me is that when the crew comes in, they show the Fantastic Four and Thor is in the background. Now, remember, Thor is basically in this point the OG of the entire crew. Everybody, well, mostly everybody is gone. And he actually makes mention of that inside of his speech when he's talking to the entire crew. And for me, this feels like it's possibly in the beginning or the middle of the movie where the conflict is starting to ramp up, specifically because it feels like they're trying to come up to a peace treaty of some sort to either stop an incursion or keep one from actually happening altogether. And of course, they have one of the most brilliant minds in the actual universe or in the MCU in general, multiverse or what have you, in Reed Richards. Because at this point, possibly all of the worlds are starting to collide and converge on each other, starting to come together, and they have to figure out how to actually get that from or keep that from happening. And it's probably gone before him at this point that he did stop Galactus from taking over his world in his time, or in his dimension specifically. So, and the way that he actually did it was by using some really futuristic tech inside of the entire world. So possibly we might see something like that in this movie as well. Then as Thor is giving his speech to the company of Agent Walker, Yelena, Ghost, and what looks like Bucky with a different style of haircut and clothes, the entirety of the Fantastic Four, Scott Lang, and Captain America, aka Sam Wilson. The significance for me for what he's saying is the fact that there are 3 potential people that were around when the original cast of Avengers were available. Now, Thor does say that everyone inside of this room is not as strong as any of the Avengers that he once fought with, and that's true. However, this now is the band of misfits that we have. So he now has to pull them together and figure out how to make them work. But since Scott is standing inside of this group, this makes me feel like because he's back, there's a possibility that we might see Kang somewhere around here as well. Now, how that's going to play out, possibly not a whole lot of screen time, maybe, but he's more than likely going to show up if Scott also is here as well, in my opinion. Then we get another shot of Namor and Shuri as Black Panther. M'Baku shows up once again, and throughout this entire montage, we still hear Thor talking about all of his fallen friends. And inside of this particular space of the trailer, it does seem like we are going up against where we're putting Wakanda up against Calotan again, where Namor is at the center. So are we seeing another feud or war between them, or are they possibly trying to figure out how to work together, but not actually working together at all? And then the scene that sent the entirety of the internet in a uproar. Literally seeing Thor trying to go at Dr. Doom, and Dr. Doom clips him with 2 fingers. Bro. Then we get another glimpse of what looks like either the School of Gifted Youngsters. It seems like it's the Sanctum Sanctorum based on the stained glass windows at the top of this scene, but it's still kind of hard to see because of the way that it's shot. This then reveals Cyclops for the first time inside of the MCU, at least in live action. Then seeing the fight scene between Gambit and Shang-Chi was absolutely A1 because both of them have similar technologies in terms of powers, but the fight choreography seems like it was actually set up by Destin Daniel Cretton. And then the TVA is back, and so is Loki. Specifically, it looks like Loki is now on missions at this point, and possibly he may have shown up at the site of the home of Captain America, Steve Rogers. And again, I'm saying that because the clues seem like it's very similar to that scene. Specifically here, because if you look at the way that the actual curtains are opened, they are exactly the same vertical standing as when we saw the in-game post-credit scene with Peggy and Cap dancing inside of their home. When I first saw this for the first time inside the trailer, I almost lost my mind, because when we see Yelena go up against Mystique for the very first time, we see the version of Mystique that was in X. So then at around the 1 minute 30 mark, everything seems like they're trying to tell us without telling us that there's going to be either a whole lot of sad moments inside of this movie, or we're going to see a lot of growing up from some of the younger characters inside of the movie, specifically Johnny Storm and possibly even Cassie Lang, because we see Scott actually kiss her on her forehead as if she's going somewhere or he's going somewhere, and both of them have to kind of come to grips with it, and she has to grow up at the same time. Then as Sue comes face to face with Shuri for the first time, this is actually a meeting of the minds of some sorts, because both of them at this point now are the faces of their franchises in some regards, because at this point all of Shuri's family is pretty much gone, is gone, and Sue is the real reason why her baby is still here. So Shuri is the face of her people, and Sue is the heart of her entire family. Then we get a montage of Gambit, Sue Storm, while she's using her invisibility and color bending powers, which we saw in Fantastic Four: The First Steps. And then more moments, specifically 2 of them, that threw me for an absolute loop, but in a good way. Again, the scene that threw everybody inside up the internet in an uproar, specifically when Thor tries to go at Dr. Doom and Dr. Doom swats him away like a fly. And then Captain America shows up, specifically Steve Rogers, in the most calming way ever. And at this point, I feel like we as a people just needed to see that nice guy, like Mr. Rogers type nice, while holding Mjolnir. Bring it in, come on. But now that we have gotten to this point, my question then becomes, where did Cap come from? That's a whole video in and of itself, but I'm going to speculate here. There's a possibility, because of who and what he looks like here, when we see him, either he has de-aged or we are seeing him from a different part of the timeline that low-key has hijacked or some sort, trying to give everybody back. I know we won't get one specific person, but what if the entirety of this whole story, like I said before in a previous video, hinges on what Loki does or doesn't do? And specifically here, if he has a hand in bringing Steve Rogers back to the fold of the entirety of the main crew, does that mean now that he is going to be one of the most powerful beings to actually go up against Dr. Doom because of his time bending powers? There's so much that we can actually go into, but there's not a whole lot of time. So if you haven't already, go ahead and leave any of your thoughts down in the comment section, because I want to talk about Doomsday ever, because there's so much inside of this movie to unpack. I'm probably going to watch this trailer and do another breakdown on it at some point this week or next week or whatever, because again, this is just just to get this out and see all the things that I saw, but there's so much inside of this. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and until next time, till next video, y'all be smooth, blurred out.